So I've met many of you before, and I'm looking forward to hear some of the voices throughout the workshop that I haven't met before. So this is Nugget, my seeing eye dog. And I feel really honored to be invited here, share with you about issues of ableism. And in particular, I like to talk about the intersection, what it's like to be a female with a disability, what it's like to live with a disability, but also what it's like to experience the other factors that are going on, like cultural factors and ethnic backgrounds. Often when you think about an image of someone with a disability, what do you think of? You think of challenges, right? You think of struggles. You think of someone who is bitter and angry and depressed and sad. You think of someone who's lonely, sitting in the room. And so today I really hope to paint a whole picture and a realistic picture of the person by talking about both struggles and challenges, because there will be struggles and challenges. That's the reality. But beside those struggles and challenges, there are also successes and triumphs and positive things that happen to people with disabilities or people who are differently abled. So in the process, I share with you, about some of the positive things that have happened to me, and I really hope that you really keep in mind that I'm not trying to be, arrogant or whatever. I just really hope to paint a realistic and a whole picture of the person and of people. I also invite you to be authentic in this workshop, because when you interact with people who are differently able, authenticity is the key. So I really invite you to be authentic. So when you listen to stories, if you feel like emotional or crying, it's okay to cry too. But if you feel like laughing, it's okay to laugh with us as well. There's a difference between laughing at us and laughing with us, right? So maybe I'll tell you what I'm currently doing. So what you're wondering, why I'm standing up here. So currently I am a patient and family counselor in the palliative and hospice care program of Lionsgate Hospital. So I work with patients who are at the end of their lives, sometimes months, days, or even hours. And I also do a lot of grief counseling as well, where I work with families after the patient dies. So it's a very heavy field, but I absolutely love it. It's a very meaningful way to be involved in someone's life journey. I also currently have a small part-time private practice where I do counseling in English and Vietnamese. I do issues like relationship, cultural disability, and grief and loss. Can you have the next slide, please, Patrice? Yeah. Thank you. So this is the agenda today. And, before we do that, I'd like you to do a small exercise. So what you do is just use your left arm and hand. Take out a piece of paper. No cheating here. Now, if you're left-handed, you can use your right arm and hand. So just take out, just with your one arm, take out a piece of paper and a pen. Unless it runs away. Okay, come here. And just write down keywords that you think of when you think about people with disability. Now write with your left hand as well, if you are right-handed. And I'll give you, a minute or something. Nugget, come. Patrice, Nugget runs away. I think I should put her on the chair here.
She's getting attracted by it.
She's attracted to my children.
It's a working dog. No, it's okay.
I'm trying to get her to
Sylvie. What are you looking for? Oh, okay. There you go. Show the video right after this. So the first one, the journey one. Okay. Yeah. So I'll share with you a little bit about my life journey. And I've been told that when you do presentation, in order to attract sighted people, you have to come up with visual ways to attract them. So before I tell you my life journey, I will show you the visual version of it. So why is it visual? Because it's actually in Vietnamese. So, but you see pictures. So And the song that you hear in the background is what I actually play at home.
27 năm trước, trên mảnh đất hiền hòa miền Nam xứ Việt quê hương của chúng ta, bên dòng Hậu Giang thơ mộng, một nghịch cảnh phủ phàng đã phủ ập xuống đầu của một bé gái mới 2 tuổi. Một cơn sốt cấp tính đã cướp mất đi đôi mắt của em. Ở lứa tuổi thần tiên, lẽ ra phải nhìn thấy được những gì xuân tươi nhất qua đôi mắt vô tư của mình. Nhưng những gì đẹp đẽ trên đời này sẽ không bao giờ xuất hiện trước mắt của em nữa. Thay vào đó, chỉ là một màu đen mờ mịt. Lớn hơn chút nữa, thay vì được cấp sách đến trường để học hỏi những điều hay lạ phải trên đời để trang bị cho mình đủ đầy kiến thức cho cuộc sống tương lai, em phải vật lộn hàng ngày để học hỏi những phương thức sống còn trong màn đen tăm tối. Cũng may, trong 14 năm đầu tiên của cuộc đời, em cũng còn may mắn được cấp sách đến trường, tuy vỏn vẹn chỉ được 2 năm. Những người với đôi mắt bình thường như tất cả chúng ta ở đây, khi còn tuổi đùa đã học hỏi được bao nhiêu trong 2 năm thì chắc ai cũng được biết rõ. Còn đối với một em bé khiếm thị như em, học hỏi được bao nhiêu trong chừng ấy thời gian, chắc chỉ có một mình em mới biết rõ mà thôi. Năm 14 tuổi, em may mắn được đến Canada này. Số phận có thể đã đặt để cho em phải sống cảnh mù lòa tăm tối trong suốt cuộc đời của mình. Nhưng số phận có đủ khả năng để giới hạn kiến thức và học vấn của em 2 năm học lực khiêm tốn hay không lại là chuyện khác. Em lại cấp sách đến trường, bước vào niên học lớp 9, chỉ với kiến thức lớp 2, với đôi mắt vẫn mù lòa muôn thuở, học chương trình lớp 9 bằng một ngôn ngữ hoàn toàn xa lạ. Đó lại không phải là một điều không ai có thể làm nổi hay sao? Nhưng đó chỉ là một điều bất khả thi đối với một người không có đủ đầy nghị lực. Em gái mà chúng ta đang nói đến ở đây đã không chịu thua số phận. Bằng một nghị lực phi thường, một ý chí sắt đá, một kiên nhẫn vô biên, em đã làm được một việc mà mới nhìn qua ai cũng xem như là không tưởng. Sau bao năm ngày đấu tranh cùng số phận, cuối cùng em đã thắng luôn cả định số. Em đã tốt nghiệp trung học, cao đẳng, rồi đại học và hoàn thành các chương trình cao học chuyên ngành tư vấn tâm lý. Sự thành công của em là một tấm gương sáng của nghị lực, của quyết tâm, của một ý chí kiên cường, bất khuất. Cách đây không lâu, chúng tôi có hỏi điều gì đã giúp em vượt qua được bao nhiêu trở ngại mà đạt được thành quả như ngày hôm nay. Em suy nghĩ giây lát, như hình dung lại trong đầu những khó khăn ngày cũ, rồi đáp: mỗi ngày khi rời khỏi nhà đi học, em đều nói bye bye mommy. Lúc đó trong lòng em muốn nói với mommy là mẹ đừng lo, con sẽ làm được. Thì sau phía sau của sự cố gắng đó và nguyên nhân của sự thành công đáng nể cuộc đó là một tình mẫu tử thiêng liêng với một sức mạnh nhiệm màu không có gì có thể so sánh được. Chúng tôi xin giới thiệu với quý vị một tấm gương sáng cho tất cả chúng ta, em Quyn Lê.
So now I'll tell you the audio version of it. So as you listen to my story and other people's stories, I'd like you to think about what are some of the protective factors. What are some of the ways that people used to cope? You know, once upon a time, there was a land far away. I was born in Vietnam, and at the age of 2, I lost my sight to some kind of fever. And one of my first memories growing up in Vietnam, I remember one day I was walking down the street with my mom, and she was describing to me the image of a man playing guitar, begging on the street, and that man happened to be blind. So, you know, at that time, blind people in Vietnam could only go to school for the blind for maximum 5 years. And after that, they would be expected to support themselves by either selling lottery tickets on the streets or, you know, begging even, or doing very low-ranking jobs. So my parents really wanted to take me out of Vietnam because that was the only way that they could have opportunities for me in terms of education, opportunities in terms of independence and self-dignity. So when I was 9, we went on this boat journey to escape Vietnam. And if you could imagine, it was a very risky, dangerous thing to do. So there were 126 people all crowded on this small boat. I'm not sure how big it was, but certainly I couldn't straighten my legs. It was that crowded. And by the third day, we ran out of food and water. But also the engine of the boat broke, so we drifted aimlessly on this huge ocean. I remember my mom was saying when she looked out in the ocean, our boat was just sort of like this tiny dot on this huge ocean where you could see nothing in sight. And also on the seventh day, we ran into pirates who came onto our boat and robbed, jewelries, and because a lot of people in Vietnam, when they left Vietnam, they would sell everything that they had in order to buy gold as a means of currency, right? So they also threatened us with, weapons, but we were really lucky in the sense that if it were real pirates, I wouldn't be here today, because typically they would kill everyone and would take the girls and sell them to prostitution. But finally they let us go, and on the 10th day we were rescued by this ship, and they took us to an island in Indonesia, and that was where a refugee camp was situated, because at that time we had to go to refugee camp in order to be qualified to come here. And the life in the refugee camp was really tough as well. I was there for 4 years, so if you could imagine, every month each person would receive 3 cans of sardines this size. 3 cans every month for everyone, and maybe 3 cups of rice a week. Growing up there, I really understood what it was like to be hungry, what it was like to wake up every day not knowing what to eat on that day. Here we talk about the power of determination and the power of one's sort of inner strength when you do counseling, right? But sometimes in certain settings, people can really find themselves in a system of disempowerment. And at that time, we really had no sense of privacy, no sense of self-control. The only sense of self-control we had was a sense of hope that we hang on to for the future. That was a sense of faith, a sense of hope. That was the only thing that we basically had. But it was also a sweet time as well, because I really get to see how good people can be as well in a time like that. So when I came to Canada, it was also really tough. It was sort of like I was placed on a new planet, because the culture was different, the language was different. So when you go to a new culture or new country, what do? You imitate people, right? You follow their behaviors. You use gestures to communicate. And so for me, because I couldn't see that, so that was a problem. And also I went to high school right away. So before that, I never had a chance to go to school. So I only went to school for 2 years. And right away, when I came to Canada, I had to start grade 9. So I had no little academic background, no language. And so some teachers, all they saw on the outside was this person who couldn't understand them, couldn't speak to them, didn't seem to understand what was going on in classes. So you know what? They thought that I was cognitively challenged. And they wanted to place me in the most basic academic level. And if you can imagine what kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that would be, right? It would mean I would not be able to go to college, let alone university, let alone becoming the counselor that I am today. But like always in my life, I've always been around very amazing people. And so some other teachers, the majority of them, saw something else. They saw that, this girl who was working extremely hard, always in the library, her marks in math is 100% or something like that, very good in music. So they really stood up for me, and they said, look, clearly this is a language problem. So because of them, that's how I could continue in the regular level. And then when I went to university, one of the problem problems was, psychology there, it was in a different university in McMaster. It was really science-based, so I had to take courses like statistics and calculus, and those were really visual. And actually 2 academic advisors, and ironically enough, one of them worked in the disability department, so they worked with students with disabilities. He said to me, maybe you should abandon your dream of becoming a counselor. Maybe you should think about something else, like sociology. And, it would be great if I'm passionate about those subjects, but I wasn't. I really wanted to take psychology. And he also said, well, also, like, if you can't see, how do you counsel people? Then you have to see body language, right? Because the understanding is that 70% of our communication is nonverbal. Or maybe for you detect nonverbal cues by your eyes. Maybe I detect my nonverbal cues with other things, like maybe my hearing, maybe my intuition, maybe, some clients told me that it seemed like you listen to our heart or our soul, or, it's just a different, certainly not the traditional ways of doing things. And that's the difference with us. A lot of times we don't do things in the conventional ways. And so I didn't listen to him. I got a lot of support from my friends and my family. But the ironic thing is, it was the visual courses like statistics and calculus. I could get A's or A+ in, and it was like psychology courses that you could, it's hard to be perfect in those courses. And my point is not to say, I'm super smart or anything. My point is to say that that really, when a lot of the times people would post what we should and should not do, and a lot of the time, if you are creative, if you really get the right kind of resources, you can overcome many challenges. Maybe not all challenges, but many challenges that some people originally thought that you couldn't overcome, or even yourself wouldn't think that you could overcome. So, and another thing I did for myself was, I will talk about family. I know you guys taking family counseling. So I grew up very sheltered by my family, very protected. Actually, my name Quyn, it means a kind of a bird in Vietnamese language. And this bird, before I came here, I never had a chance to learn to fly on my own. And I was, kept in this tightly secure cage, if you can imagine. So only when I came to Canada could I learn the first time I really learned to fly on my own. The first time I could experience a sense of freedom, a sense of empowerment. I don't have perfect wings like you do. I fly in awkward ways at times, but at least I have a chance to fly. And so one of the first things I did was I moved out of my parents' place when I was 18. So many things are going on. So culturally, in Asian culture, you don't really move out of your place until you're married. That's the cultural factor, right? Also, they couldn't see, because they have always sheltered, protected me, they couldn't see myself being on my own. So it was extremely scary and very difficult for them to be accepting of that decision. But, I knew that in order for me to gain a sense of self-respect and confidence, I had to do that. And another thing I did for myself was, getting Nugget. Not Nugget at that time. It was a different dog, but getting a guide dog. Because before that, like, whenever I went out, I always go out with my family or with friends. Like, never would I venture out on my own. And I knew that in order for me to be a professional and to be able to do different things in my life, I would have to be independent. And I was pretty scared of dogs, so it took me quite a lot to get a dog. I remember when I first got her, she took her home, and not Nugget. She would, like, all of a sudden at night, I would wake up and hear this breathing, so like a man breathing in my room. So it was quite something. So now I'll share with you about, can you go to the next slide? Dimensions of disability. Okay, so today I won't tell you exactly what to do when you meet a visually impaired person or hearing impaired person or mobility impaired person. Everyone is different. It depends on the types of disability. It depends on the levels of severity, because a blind person is different from one who is visually impaired who still can see a bit. My hope today is more to talk to you about your perception, your biases, your attitudes when you approach and interact people who are differently abled. So in particular, I will highlight two distinctions. For this slide, I'll talk about invisible versus visible, and then congenital versus acquired. Because someone who become physically impaired later on in life, they have a very different process. So can you go to the next slide, Patrice? Oh, the last slide, the dimension, that was the picture of Albert Einstein. He's the smartest guy, right? Do you know what people thought that he might have had? Yeah, what do you know? Do you know? Yeah, that's right. That's one would think, right? Okay, so are we on the invisible side?
Now we are.
Yeah, okay. Look at these two pictures. What did you see? Uh-huh. Okay, so Walt Disney, can you guess what he might have? Or do you know if he has anything? Pardon? Yeah. So, like, if you read the slide, it said they didn't think he was creative enough, slow as a child. And see how famous he is, huh? So, tell me, what do you think is the difference between visible versus invisible condition? So say invisible, what do you think might be some of the positive things, but as well as challenges?
You don't get the stigma, but at the same time, people would probably attribute your behaviors to your character or something that you can control.
Oh, I see. So, yeah, so something, because it's not obvious, it's in the mind, you can do something about your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. No, that sounds, yeah. So, yeah, people are not as willing to accommodate. If they don't see the condition, why do I have to accommodate you, right? Okay. So you know, and what else might it be? I know you're kind of shy. 22 people here. 22 brains. Well, also another thing is, okay, so because they don't see the condition, they treat the person like everyone else, right? So that's the positive thing. But the thing is that there are a lot of hidden assumptions about, because they might be exposed to people with invisible conditions, but they might not know. So those hidden assumptions don't get to be counteracted. So say they think of people with disabilities, they think they're quote unquote stupid, right? Or people with schizophrenia are dangerous, rather than they're more vulnerable than dangerous. So also they really struggle with self-disclosure, because if I disclose my condition to you, would you still like me? Would you still accept me? Would you still respect me? So yeah, so that's okay. I forget. I'm trying to think. Okay, can you go to the next slide? What is it now? Commentary?
Disability and grief.
Oh, yes. So I do these slides in memory. So. Grieving, disability, acquired disability is really like grieving. They grieve for the physical loss, the loss of a bodily function. So that could be hearing, that could be the use of the legs, it could be the use of the arms, the eyes, so on, right? So, but not only is it a physical function, it's also, a physical loss is also an emotional loss as well. They often feel isolated. They feel suicidal at times. They feel angry at God, angry at the world, angry at people who might have caused them the disability, even angry at themselves. And these are very, very natural responses. They also feel depressed, lonely. So as a counselor, one of the first few sessions, when you see these people really validate. When I work with grieving, with grief, when individuals are grieving, I really validate what it means for them to lose all these things. There's also social loss as well. They lose friendships because some friends don't know what to do with them. Some friends treat them like a child now. Also loss of status. They might have been a lawyer in the past. They might have been a doctor. And it's not, they haven't known how to be a lawyer without being able to see. So these are the adjustments that they have to go through. I remember one time I worked with this patient in the palliative care unit. And many of the nurses and staff really had a hard time with her. She was really mean to them, very nasty to them. She was quite angry at times, really challenged their care. And when I walked in with Nugget, she really liked dogs. So right away she was receptive to me and Nugget. And she shared with me, you don't know what it's like to be able to do all kinds of things before. Now I have to rely on people to do basic, very intimate and private things like going to the toilet, or even being able to just get up and walk to say the TV. So it's a lot of losses for them, all kinds of them. And another big thing is denial. And you know how when I think about denial, often we think of it in a negative way. When I work with grief, I think of denial as it's a healthy way to help the person cope, to help the person adjust slowly to their condition. Because if you take it in right away, it's just too much. They have to slowly take it in. So one of the things that people might deny about is the use of a cane, or the use of a wheelchair, or the use of clutch or walker. You know why? Because for them to use those things, that means they have accepted the condition, the label, the image of a blind person like walking clumsily down the street, right? The image of a person in a wheelchair being pushed around by people. So for them to use those things means that they have to accept that image, and it's just too painful for them to accept yet. It would take time for them, but for us to say, it might be better that you use a cane, or it's just too fast for them. You have to allow them time to adjust to it. So now I'll show you a video of Rick Hansen and how he talked a little bit about the process that he went through. Thank you, Patrice. I hope you don't feel like I'm telling you what to do.
You need to tell me what to do. So Rick Hansen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Rick, for those who may not know your story, how did your injury happen?
Well, I was 15 years old, a young kid from Williams Lake, British Columbia. My whole life revolved around physical activity, sports, hiking, the outdoors, the use of my legs. Then one day I was coming home from a fishing trip with a buddy, and we got a ride in the back of a pickup truck, and the guy crashed going around a corner, and unfortunately my back was injured, and the spinal cord was damaged, and I became paralyzed, and that was a huge challenge for me at the age of 15.
Yeah, tell me about sort of that first year after finding out what had happened. I can't imagine.
Coming from that environment where I never knew anybody with a disability before, and all of a sudden, I couldn't use my legs and was going to be either in a chair or walking on crutches and braces. My sport activities were not possible. Thinking about what was possible for the outdoors, all those things really forced me into a deep depression. I was angry at the driver. I wasn't accepting responsibility for getting in the back of the pickup truck. I was just basically filled with a lot of fear of what the unknown was all about, and had to rebuild my life and see new possibilities. And that took a long time because it was starting all over again. And fortunately, I had some good family and friends and role models that surrounded me and inspired me and didn't give up on me and encouraged me to work through those tough, dark days. And I think the most important thing is hanging on to hope and believing, that life can be better, and working really hard at it when it's painful, and knowing that you've got people there with you when the times are tough. That's what got me through it. And then I was able to realize, boy, I could still be an athlete again. I didn't have to use my legs. I could be in a wheelchair and use my arms and be propelled by my heart. And that wheelchair sport was all over the world in 100 plus countries, thousands of athletes, and all of my hopes and dreams were waiting for me. But I just had to reframe and deal with the changes.
That's a powerful thing to say, that you reframe or reposition your mind to accommodate the circumstances that life has dealt you.
Yeah, and how, looking back on it, I can understand it more technically, but, as a young kid, 15, struggling through this issue, I was realizing that, that I had to search back to where the source of my pain was coming from. And most of my pain that I was struggling through wasn't because of the situation that I couldn't use my legs. It's like I put an artificial kind of trap in my head about what my life was going to be like, and it meant I had to stand up. But I was still Rick. I was still an adventurer, a guy who loved the outdoors, who loved sport. I had to just kind of do it differently. And as soon as I released from that old sort of model, and I started realizing, gosh, yeah, I can still do all these things. They're just waiting for me. So I really had a handicap in my mind because of my lack of education or awareness or experience that I had to deal with.
I showed this video for some times. I didn't realize at the end that it's show a quote. So, that's what happens when you listen and you don't get to it. So I've just been informed by Patrice that this portion is not tested on the exam, so you can relax. So now I'd like each of you to partner up with someone, just a partner, and what you do is one person would close their eyes, and while they're closing their eyes, they will listen to the other person, and the other person would share with them about, maybe a personal experience that they've had with a person who is differently abled. Any questions? You know what I mean? Yeah, just so the one who closes the eyes will be the one who's listening. So I'll tell you the tip. It's a big group here. It's very noisy. So really sit close to your partner. That's how you can hear. Because I always have a hard time in big groups. So okay, so we're cheating though. I'll give you about 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm wondering if we can, sorry to stop, but I'm wondering if we can share in the group sort of what it was like for you. Now keep in mind that this is the first time that you do it, so it's different from someone who, like me, who do it all the time. I wish I can get you to do exercises for other types of disability, but I don't have a wheelchair or walker or anything, so it's kind of hard. So keep in mind that this is the first time, but at least you have a sort of like a taste of what it's like for those who become physically challenged later on. So maybe someone can share what it was like for them.
I was really aware of all the other people talking.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it was like my head was going to explode. And trying to focus on it would have been so much easier.
Oh, Hannah, you were in the other one.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're going to be sick of me talking.
No, I'm not. And last time you had us walk around with our eyes closed.
I will later.
Well, we did
not get away with it.
And it was just easier to open my eyes and be able to see her to be able to attend to what she was saying.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Very
sick
challenging.
of Quyn.
Pardon?
I'm not sick of you.
I don't feel the need to say as much. Like I was okay with just being with that person and listening to his story.
I'm confused. So you feel the need to
I didn't feel the need to say as much.
as a listener or as
As the listener, yeah.
as a listener?
Or sorry, yes, as the listener.
Oh, okay, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I didn't feel the need to say as much. I could just sort of be fully absorbed in hearing their story.
Yeah.
And saying something for some reason it didn't really occur to me. I just listened.
Uh-huh.
For me, I had a similar experience, but it was like I was trying so hard to listen that I couldn't almost talk. Like I don't think I
Yeah, you took
really
all
said
away of your
anything.
resources, huh? Yeah, I see.
I found myself trying to picture what was happening visually.
Uh-huh.
Even something like if the voice came faint or like sort of maybe
Yeah.
indicating like her head was moving away or something. I was like I was just more aware of that and trying to picture what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
I found that I was able to pay attention to Sarah's emotions more.
What do you remember what you picked up?
Not like specifically, but it was like I'm closing my eyes to remember now because I feel like that's how I coded it in my brain. Just the depth of emotion, like I could hear when it changed, which I guess I would normally pick up first visually.
Yeah.
But I like heard it and it, I felt like it was like a new experience that I missed out on when I'm looking at someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I found out as well that I think I was more in tune to the subtle changes in tone of voice and subtle changes in emotion, but at the same time I felt like I needed to open my eyes to just get that
So did you?
clarification. No, I didn't. But I almost needed like the visual to confirm what
Yes.
my
So you kind of wondering if you should trust what you pick up audio with, yeah? Mm-hmm.
yeah, like I had a hypothesis, but I needed
Right.
the visual evidence to confirm it.
Are a lot of you here do crisis line? Yeah, so when you're on the phone, isn't that the same? Well, it's more quiet, for sure. But yeah, it's kind of like, but even for me, it's different too, because on the phone, I don't know, I feel connected, but not as connected than in person. Because on the phone, there could be other things going on still. Whereas when the person is in the room, particularly if it's a quiet room, you can pick up a lot. One time I had this client that I was seeing for a while, and when he came in, I said to him, I noticed you're different today, because as he walked into the room with me, and because this guy was usually very sort of very welcomed, because I could smell his cologne. But also kind of like his walking was really precise, like very sort of confidently. But that day he came in, he was sort of like dragging his, and it was carpeted too, so I was surprised I could hear it. But he certainly walked into the room kind of slowly and reluctantly kind of thing. And so I asked him about that. I said, I noticed you a bit different today. I noticed that your walking is not as quick pace as it used to be, or often, and that's how we got to talk about what's going on for him just recently, like a lot of depressed feelings and difficult feelings. I also remembered there was a time when I worked with this client, and she. It was a small room, but every time she came in for a few sessions, not just one, I noticed that she would not take her coat off. And so eventually I asked her, I'm just wondering, I noticed that you often have your coat on, and I wonder if you can tell me more about it. and then that kind of started a conversation about her struggling with body image and disordered eating. So I really appreciate you did that exercise, and thank you very much for sharing with us, and hopefully I'll get to hear other people later. Okay, I'm not sure what's the next is comment. Yeah, so common challenges. So in terms of physical, there are, I would tell you that the physical barrier, so the not being able to see, not being able to walk. You remember how Rick talked about, sometimes it's not so much about the situation of not being able to use his legs, it's more the barrier in his mind, right, that he imposed for himself. Or sometimes a lot of the barriers being imposed by other people upon people who are differently able. And so for us, the more predictable the environment is, the more independent we can be. So for me, when people move things around, like I would hunt for them like crazy. Or say for someone who relies on elevator to get upstairs with the wheelchair, if that's not there, then they're not able to go to the office, things like that. But things like that they upset us, but not so much. When we fall or when we bump into things or whatever, those things can hurt, I don't know, a few minutes, a few hours, maybe a few days the most. But when people make hurtful comments, when they don't believe in our abilities, or when they say what we should and should not do, those things can really be damaging to people's self-esteem, and it can last for months or years or even lifetime. I'll tell you a story to emphasize the kind of like the emotional as well as social challenges. So when I was in high school, there was these two twin boys, and they were so it was a school for the blind. So these twin boys were blind, and I remember they were really happy boys. They all the sports in that school were adapted for visually impaired people. So they did wrestling, downhill skiing, swimming, baseball, hockey, I don't know, like a lot of things. And they also were really academically doing really well. And actually they were the object of admiration in that school because they were involved in a lot of things. But they were a little bit still immature, which is common for teenagers, right? And then they parted. Each went to college, and so I focused on one boy in particular. His name was Chris, and he went to college. And the first year, he became really isolated. People didn't know how to support him. He wanted to become a personal trainer, so he was in some kind of recreational program. And it's probably the notion of body ableism was happening, right? So he didn't feel like he could be equal to that of his peers, sighted peers. And so he became depressed. And the first year they found himself hung in his resin. And that was like a wake-up call for me, because I never imagined. I always had the image of him bouncing down the hallway, very happy-go-lucky. Never thought of himself as depressed or suicidal. And in my life, I've personally known 3 blind people who committed suicide. And it's not so much around not being able to see. A lot of time it's more around relationships with people, with family, with partners, and often it's the interpersonal factors that are going on that make very difficult for these people. Family and cultural factors. So family factors, as I said before, a lot of the time the families of these people are they either overly protective or they're very neglectful. So so there's a lot of overprotection going on. I have a friend who's, say 42, and he doesn't even know how to successfully toast his bread or something without burning himself, because his family would always do things for him. So when you work with parents, sometimes it's really difficult for parents to allow their children to make mistakes, because for them it's so dangerous for them. It's no good for them. So really encourage them to encourage their children doing things, and because I would tell you that the people who have disabilities, who are well adjusted, a lot of it is really the family, because families that are successful are those who allow their children to experience all kinds of things. They would be okay seeing their children fall, or seeing their children go out and do things and experience different things. So family is one of the starting points, and also there's also a lot of shame in some families around having a person with a disability as a family member. I remember one of my clients who has 2 jaws, born with 2 jaws, and one of the comments that her sister would often hear from her friends is, "You live with a monster." Can you imagine? So it's a lot of shame. I have a friend who, whenever there are guests who come over to his house, his mom would tell him to hide in the room. So there's a lot of shame around hiding the person. Back in the day, they used to hide away people with mental illness, or people with born with certain physical conditions. Cultural factors. So in certain cultures, certainly in the Vietnamese culture, I would say probably more traditional cultures, there's the notion that if you have a physical condition, it's because you've done something really bad in your previous life, or you've done something, or people who become physically impaired later on, it's because something that you deserve it. You've done something bad. You drove that car fast. You did this, and all that. So it's a lot of blaming going on. So if we take on that approach, then it's really difficult to be compassionate towards these people, right? Very difficult to be understanding. So cultural factors is also, in sort of certain societies, because they don't have opportunities for these people to gain independence and education. So the circle becomes like a vicious circle, right? Then they don't get to expose to people who can function well if they're given the opportunities. So then every time they meet someone, it confirms their sort of original assumption. And also, in some society, there's a lot of, and even here, I would hear, that 60 or 70% of people who have physical challenges are unemployed. So if you're unemployed, then you're not represented in the working market, and so it becomes, how many times do I go to conferences and go to classes and even working in the hospital? I would be the only one who have a physical disability. So it becomes like a vicious circle. I'm not sure if I get anything. Okay, so can you go to the next slide, please? So next slide is stereotypes. Oh no, it's me. Sorry. Okay, so I really like this quote. A person who is severely impaired never knows his hidden sources of strength until he's treated like a normal human being and encouraged to shape his own life. So now I show you a video of Nick. Fujisik, I cannot pronounce his name right. Do you know him? Does anyone know? Yeah.
How do you
He's
say his name? Food.
yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
How do you
Yeah, Vujic. Yeah.
The J is a Y.
What makes someone extraordinary? Their abilities? Their talents? Or simply, their smile? When I first met Nick Vujicic, I knew I had just encountered someone extraordinary. From the moment he began to share his amazing story with me, I witnessed firsthand how God is using a man with no arms and no legs to be God's hands and his feet.
My dad was saying that he was, his head was next to my mum's head as I was being born, and he saw my shoulder, and he just went pale. He was hoping my mum didn't see me because he saw that I had no right arm. And my dad had to leave the room, and he couldn't believe what he saw, and the doctor came in, and my dad said, "My son, he has no right arm." And he says, "No, your son has no arms or legs." And he said he nearly fell on the floor. He couldn't believe it. And the whole church was mourning, like, why would God let the pastor's son be born that way? And my mum, at first, she didn't want to hold me. She didn't want to, breastfeed me and all that. She just felt very uncomfortable for the first 4 months. And it took them quite a while before they could trust in God that he didn't make a mistake, that he didn't forget them or me.
Nick's parents gave their fear and even disappointment in their son's disability over to the Lord. They chose to trust God and his promise that he had a plan and purpose, a hope and a future for their son. But as the years passed, Nick, on the other hand, had many challenges trusting in a God that he felt gave him less.
I challenged God. I said, "God, I know that I'm a sinner. I know that I won't probably have peace until you're in my heart, but I will not let you in my heart until you answer me, why? Why did you take my arms and legs? Why didn't you give me what everybody else has?"
Notice that's a grieving process as well.
Question, I will not serve you. And so I wanted to end it. If God wasn't going to end my pain, I was going to end it myself. So at age 8, I tried to drown myself in a bathtub of 4 inches of water. I told my mum and dad, "I'm just going to relax in the bathtub. Can you put me in the bathtub?" And I turned over a couple times to see if I could do it. I couldn't do it. The thought that stopped me from going through with it was the love for my parents. Because I love them so much, and all they did was love me. And I thought to myself, if I actually went through with this, I pictured my funeral, I pictured my parents, and all I saw was guilt on their shoulders, that they couldn't have done more.
That would be the last time Nick would attempt suicide, but it wouldn't be the last time he would come face to face with those deep issues that made him want to end the pain. Then one day, Nick's mother had him read an article about a severely disabled man, and that man's story made a huge impact on Nick.
I have a choice to either be angry at God for what I don't have or be thankful for what I do have. And my mum, she said, "Nick, God's going to use you. I don't know how, I don't know when, but God's going to use you." And those seeds started penetrating in my heart. And that's when I started seeing that there is no point in being complete on the outside when you're broken on the inside. And I found out that God can heal you without changing the circumstance. I gave my life to Jesus Christ when I read John 9 at age 15, where a man was coming through a village, and a man...
Quyn, I just noticed Nick's wearing a t-shirt, and it says, "Let me so love." Did you see that?
No.
Anyone else? Besides you?
That's a blind humor, yes.
But I just wanted to tell you that. That's what he had on his shirt.
What do you think it means?
Let me so love.
What means let me sow?
Sow love, like when you sow seeds into the field.
Oh, sow love. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
S-O-W.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's sort of how he felt to me when I was looking at him. He sort of had that sort of a sense about him that's, even when he was talking about his parents, he sort of got a little bit choked up about the love that he experienced from him and what he felt for them. And with that "Let Me So Love" on his shirt, it was just such a nice little parallel that I noticed. So
I've seen other videos of him on YouTube, and he speaks to youth a lot in schools, and he offers them hugs at the end of the talk, and so people will come up and these young people and hug him, just weeping at how he is able to impact them. But isn't that cool, right? A guy who doesn't have arms is just giving these hugs away. It's he's an amazing man.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, it's how his parents were grieving too. In the beginning, they couldn't accept him, right? But they were able to come around and come to love him, and he could feel the love. Can you imagine for those who never actually felt the love with their family? What would that be like, right? That's why the difference, it's easy for, say, I don't know, myself or Rick Hansen or Nick, to be able to be optimistic and to be able to, go out in the world and sort of like do different things and challenge, because we have the support, friends, family, all these protective factors going on. And unfortunately, a lot of the other people, they some other factors are missing, either social factors or family factors or interpersonal factors. So when you have all these things going on, it really make things possible for these people to be able to sort of rise above their barriers or their limitations. Are we on the stereotype slide?
No, not yet. Now we are.
Okay. So, disability is, even though it's a physical thing, but a lot of the time it is a social construct. I would tell you that certain places, certain people that I find myself in, I would feel more quote-unquote disabled than others. Where I work, where I work, I deal with a lot of nurses and volunteers and staff and doctors, and I would say they're not perfect, but the difference is that they're very helpful, they're very sensitive to what I might need them to help me with, but yet they're not overbearing. And I feel really empowered in that kind of setting. I feel really accepted and very welcomed. Everywhere I walk with Nugget, it's like, oh yeah, Nugget, it's like almost like constant affection with them, but also respect. And it's not easy, it's difficult enough to learn to function in the sighted world. As you know, this world is very visually oriented, right? Even for me to do this presentation, I have to think about slides and pictures and videos to keep you guys engaged. And it's even more difficult to learn to gain the respect as a professional, because a lot of times people don't have a reference point. There's not a manual to tell me how to do counseling without being able to see. How do I get the trust and the confidence in my clients? How do I get the respect from the doctors and the nurses? So it's not easy. Unfortunately for me, because this setting, people are more sensitive and more educated and have better awareness. They're not perfect, I tell you. Sometimes they say, "Oh, do you see this or do you see that? Take a look at the computer." But that's okay too, because one thing I'll tell you, when you talk to people who are different, feel free to say walk, run, see. We use those things all the time. It's when you when you tiptoe around the subject, that's when we can pick up that you are uncomfortable. So it's okay to use those terms as well, like look, see, What do you think are some of the stereotypes? about people who are differently abled.
Well, they just won't be able to do it as well as some kids.
Yes. That's one of them. Lots of them.
Maybe that they're unhappy.
Yeah, like they're depressed and sad and
Maybe that they can't be fully self-sufficient.
they rely on other people.
That they can't experience life fully.
Yeah, like yesterday I went on a boat trip with people at work, and all these sort of like wonderful visual things going on. So, because we go to different islands and things like that. And for me, it's the sensation of being on the boat. That's more fun. So like, it just because you don't see it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it, right? People find different ways. And also, the guide tour described things to us as well. And some of my colleagues told us things as well. So yeah, so anything else that you've heard of?
Sometimes I think I might globalize a disability, so I might think that because someone is in a wheelchair, they also are cognitively impaired, or you just and when that's not the case.
Sometimes people, it doesn't happen anymore. It used to be. People are better now, but sometimes they talk to me as if I'm deaf or something, right? Or like, you guys see the Hear Evil, See Evil, no, See No Evil, Hear No Evil movie? Yeah, like, he's deaf, but he's not stupid. So, it's like, yeah. Or sometimes like people are so surprised, oh, she can use a cell phone too. I am just either I'm kind of like some kind of superhuman being, or like, I can't even. Oh, the one time I was on a ferry, and this lady asked me, how do you feed yourself? Like it's so for me, like, so this is good about self-awareness. Like right away, this would be. It's really hard to connect to those people, but I realized like this is a perfect opportunity for me to educate her. So I really try hard not to be defensive, and I said, actually, it just certain things you do so automatic that you don't even think about, like like for example, like how do you read? Like I mean I wasn't even sarcastic. Right? Like it's certain things become very automatic. Like how do you read? How do you drive? You learn to do those things, but now you don't even think about, okay, when you read, you first, like how do you look at the page to read? Like where do you read? Like how do you start a line? So she got it, and then she said, oh yeah, I guess so. So you just do it. So the thing is, so I don't know. And then we continue to talk, and in the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes, she started to share with me about some of her fears. She's thinking of, leaving her job as a middle-aged woman, and what would that mean for her, and so on. And so for other people, it's really easy for them to be angry, right? So they would talk back. What kind of a stupid question is that? And then the problem with that is people would walk away and say, oh, blind people or people in wheelchairs are so angry. It's so negative. It's so, so it's just, it's really difficult because really, can you do the other side for me? So these are some of the stereotypes, like people with disabilities don't need love. They are non-sexual, or they're victim, or they're villain, right? Like, I don't know, many other things. So now I'd like you to partner up with someone, and basically one person will close their eyes and allow the other person to guide them. So I know it's a bit scary, but I do it all the time, so I know you can do it. So maybe Patrice, could I borrow you to demonstrate? Thank you.
Yes, here I am.
Do you need any interest? Okay, so I'm the person who cannot see, right? I hang on to Patrice's arm rather than she hang on to my arm, because then I'm leading her. Nothing worse than a blind person leading her. Right? But also when I hang on to, now sometimes some people, what they do is they take my hand, but the problem with that is it's hard for me to feel her body. So when I take her arm, when she turns left, I can tell when she turns right, or dancing with Jesus. You know, so yeah, see, I'm following you. Yeah, so also yeah, it's and when you meet someone, don't automatically take the arm off for them. Would you like to take my arm? Because they might not want to, right? They might want to use the dog, or they might want to use the cane, or just ask them. And I'm not sure what else. Oh, and also I'm used to doing this. So when you guide your partner, make sure to take care of them. They're a little bit more delicate. And you know, just also if you want to show them something, feel free to say, "Can I take your hand and show you this?" So place their hand on the chair or on the table, or some, you know, like to, instead of say, "Oh, here's the chair." What is it? You know, so yeah, so go ahead. Go for it. I mean, any questions? No?
So
Okay, thank you.
maybe take maybe 3-4 minutes, 2 minutes each.
Yeah. 5 minutes, Patrice. So I'm wondering if we can share in the group what it was like for you.
Sarah and I both noticed that as soon as we switched to being the person who was being led, so when we had our eyes closed, that it felt like we were walking super quickly. Like it made it seem like when Sarah.
Oh, when you close your eyes, it seems that you walk too fast.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because every step is sort of scary.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It was really scary, and then I just kept imagining something smacking me in the face. Like,
Yeah.
So it was like I knew I could trust Jenna, and she would never like lead me into something, but you just realize like, how much you have to. Yeah, it's true. Luckily, we weren't fighting today, so. Okay.
You know, one time when I took the class in Natalie's class, and somebody was guiding Natalie and bumped into something.
I thought it was the opposite. I thought I was walking a lot slower, but it was not clear. The gun in my hand, the one that was free, kept kind of
Stretching out?
stretching outwards.
Yeah. Kind of like a self-protection, right?
Yeah, kind of like protective.
Yeah.
So I would think I did have trust in Erica, but if it was someone I didn't know.
It's kind of like an automatic reflex, even.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's not so much, well, it's trust, but it's also, yeah, that sort of automatic self-protection thing. Yeah.
For me, it really helped to have the person guiding me tell me what was going on, or where we were going, or what was around me. And I think that we sort of take that stuff for granted, and we don't talk about what we're going to do or what's in front of us, but that aspect of it really helped.
Yeah, so I would say that when you're the one who's guiding, ask the person whether, so when you start to tell them things, ask them, oh, would you like to know? Or, you know, sometimes, because this is the first time you do it, so you might like to know everything, right? But I might not like to know everything. So sometimes become like a big deal. Then I feel kind of bad, because then the person has to guide me, but also have to tell me things, and it becomes sort of too much. Like I feel bad for the person. Yeah. So so really I think always safe to ask the person. Everyone is really different. So their needs are different too. But it totally makes sense, because this is the first time that you do it. That's why you like to know everything going on.
So it was pretty cool how much I could pick up from sound.
Yeah.
Like I instantly knew when we were in this hallway, just because I heard echoes and just like the sounds changed, and that's something I've never noticed before.
Yeah. Sound like extra louder, you mean?
Well, I don't know. I could just tell that we were in a more enclosed space.
Oh, good for you. Yeah.
And yeah, just like when you have sight, or when I have sight, I don't often even pay attention to the sounds. And so it kind of made me realize that if this is something that, if I was to become blind, that it would be a huge challenge for me, but there'd be ways that I could function as well.
Yeah, you know, people have really an amazing capacity to adapt. A lot of times they really struggle at first. You know, it often takes people, but I don't know, it really depends on everyone, but you know, a year or two or more to really become comfortable, because it's and it's kind of like this. When you're panicky, all your resources is kind of being put into that anxiety, right? So you don't have other resources to pay attention to anything else. And so for them, like it's sort of difficult to think about other ways that they can use to help them adjust. One of the things Patrice said to me that she noticed is that the person who's guiding tends to be really keep the other person very tight to the body. Did you notice that you were doing that?
Well, you told that I did that because you told us to do that. Because you said we kind of experimented doing just the hand.
Yes.
And I thought you said that it's better to be guided closer to the body because you have more of a reference point.
I think it's my I don't know. I guess I might have miscommunicated. I just meant more like hanging onto the arm, I guess. Yeah. But that's totally, you know, because I was wondering whether you were afraid. Well, not you, but someone was afraid. Sort of that hanging on tight is more sort of like a way to protect the other person. You know, it could be too.
I did that. Christine took my arm, but then I put my hand on top of her hand, so sort of in a very protective, but sort of nurturing, and added, thinking that might help her feel more comfortable, which may not be the case for a lot of people, because I'm one of those people who says less touch is better. But and I noticed that, and so then I let go of her hand and just let her touch me at some point, so that was hard for me to do.
So there's also gender and cultural factors going on too. I'm wondering for the men here, like what was it like to be, what was it like to be led? No, to be guided? Yeah, what was it like for you to be led?
Actually, it was odd because as soon as I was going to be led, I put out my arm for her to grab me because that's what I'm used to. Used to having other people hold on to me rather versus the opposite. So that was kind of an interesting experience. And then MC had to tell me that's like, oh, you're supposed to hold on to me. And I'm like,
yeah, you see, so it's like for men, especially for them, like the idea of receiving help and still feel okay about it is extremely difficult, particularly for those who used to be able to, or not be able to, used to like to do everything themselves, and so that the reason I say cultural factors as well is because sometimes when I walk with people, say from a very traditional culture or even the elderly or whatever, sometimes like they become overly protective. So when you come to stay, okay, are you ready? So like just make a big deal of it. And but the thing is, the more tense you are, the more anxious we feel, because we can pick up that you're feeling anxious about the whole thing. Whereas when I walk with people who kind of the younger generation here, or people who are sort of more educated. It's just very natural. All I have to do is just hang on to your arm, and they just tell me when the step is coming up or the step is coming down, and that's all. So, so thank you very much for participating in that experience. I think I will, Patrice, I'll go to. Let's see how I think I'll go to counseling strategy.
Is that the next slide?
Yeah, I don't know. No, it's not in the
Coping
next slide.
style.
Yeah, I think I'll skip over that.
Counseling strategy.
Yeah, if I have time, I'll go back. Okay. So, when you counsel individuals who are differently abled, really, well, obviously the focus is not on the disability, right? But one of the ways you can make it comfortable for the person is really initiate the quote-unquote disability talk. What I mean by that is say, when they come in, just say, if you see something very obvious, because it's like an elephant in the room, right? If someone comes in with a wheelchair, it's obvious. Someone comes in with a guide dog, it's obvious. So if you don't talk about it, it sort of tells the client that you're not comfortable, that you kind of tiptoe around the subject. So just ask them, say, I noticed that, whatever you notice, say whatever you notice, and I'm wondering how I can be best helpful to you. What are some of the things that I need to know that I can help you? And just have that discussion around it. Because sometimes if you don't talk about it, what if they need to go to the washroom? Things like that. And if you haven't talked about it, I remember one time I went to a therapy session, and I was crying and I'm wondering where's the box of tissues, but they didn't so when someone who's visually impaired, give them a description of the room, maybe tell them where a box of tissues might be, or where a different chair might, or even ask them, what do you need to know to feel sort of comfortable and independent in this room. So that's why I said clients' feedback and input. Never assume, just because you've dealt with someone who is, visually impaired in the past, and you deal with a different person who is also visually impaired, never make the assumption, because everyone is very different. Also, for example, with guide dogs are told are not supposed to be pet or interacted or talked to at all. But I'm different. People can pet my dog as long as I'm not walking. So everyone is really different, and even it depends on the levels of the severity of the impairment. So someone who is totally blind would be different than someone who can see a bit. So for those who can see a bit, maybe something about the lighting of the room that bothers them. Little things like that. So you have to ask them. You don't know, and you're not expected to know. And actually, if you walk away from here today, and if you think that you know all that you have to know, then maybe I haven't done a good job here. But if you walk away today thinking, oh, it's very complex, and it is complex, because when you work with a client, in general, everyone is also different too, right? Just because someone who's depressed, it doesn't mean this, it doesn't mean that. It's good to be mindful of the different issues, and to sort of pay attention to that and be sensitive to that, but not to assume that those issues could be going on for the person. And also, I would say authenticity is, like I said, is very important for us. So it's okay to say, I'm not sure what to do here. I feel like I'm not being very helpful. I feel it's okay to admit those things, rather than just pretend like you know everything, you know how to help them, and so it's just being authentic and getting the feedback. Really explore internal and external resources. A lot of these clients, they have a lot of resources. That's how they are where they are at this time in their life. So really find out those resources, and even explore the ones that they might not know about yet. And socio-cultural factors, like family factors. You know, what kind of family context are they in? What kind of cultural factors that may be going on? And do you have any question about this lie that you like me to sort of focus on?
I do.
Yeah, okay.
Earlier you talked about families who felt ashamed of a family member who has a disability sometimes. And I just wonder how would you work with a family like that? Like how would you approach a situation like that?
Okay. Well, I haven't worked with them, but this is sort of what I would think that I would do. So I might not give you the perfect answer. But first, really validate the shame. It's okay to feel ashamed with these things. Like validate. So when you have a son who cannot walk, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for your family? Really find out all the factors, the reasons behind that shame, and behind that embarrassment, or behind even all the fears. So I would say, first validate those things that are going on for them, because once they're able to talk about those things, then they're able to externalize the shame. Then my guess is that then work on sort of help them connect with other families, or help them to sort of come up with other role models. And I'm not sure what. Do you have any other idea, Patrice?
Yeah, that sounds very good.
Yeah.
Because in a way you're saying, I'm going to sort of teach the family how to engage in a conversation that maybe they haven't had before.
Mm-hmm. Lots of things are not being talked about, and
And then you're also talking about connecting them with a community of people who are working with the same things.
Yeah. But I think, the internal has to happen first. And all the validation has to happen first before. Because, if you connect them with communities right away, they might not even open to doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think also another big thing is encourage the engagement between them and that person. The emotional engagement. So even just admit to them those fears or even the shame. Have an open discussion about that, and it will be difficult for the other person to hear at first. But educate. I guess do some psycho-ed around what it means for that person, for the family to be able to talk about that with the person, because now things are in the open. Yeah. So, any other questions? Because I'm going to show you a video.
I just have a comment. I would imagine that there would be a lot of loss to process as well for the family. Just the sense of expectation they had, or what have you.
Yeah.
And so in some ways it would be a process of grieving too.
Exactly. Yes.
And that it would take time to do that reframe, like Hanson was talking about, for them as well.
Yeah, it's the loss. It's the loss of all the dreams that they have for the children, right? For the child. Yeah, all the dreams, all those expectations. So, really validate. What does it mean for them to now the son not going to become a doctor anymore? Yeah. Any other questions before I show you the video? And then, in terms of counseling, I guess.
Well, I'm wondering what you would do besides validation to help somebody go through that grieving process. Like, do you see it more as something that they have to kind of go through on their own time, or do you do anything in particular to help facilitate that or speed up the grieving process?
I wouldn't be as concerned about speeding up the process, because if they lost something that big, it would take them time, and so just I guess gentle with them and allow them as much space and time as they need because this is something lifetime, and it's not going to, they might not even change in a few months, or but it's amazing once you're able to validate all the things that are happening with them. I don't know, it just sort of it brings people to different points, and even I would bring in all the families in together. If it's just the mom, then I would bring in the child who has the disability, or if it's the sibling, then I bring in the others. It's sort of kind of notice, really pay attention to who's the main figure in the family, because sometimes one person accepts what's going on, then the other person sort of start to see, oh yeah, that's right, that's not too bad. You know what I mean? Like, so say if the father is the boss, and if the father really has a hard time accepting this, that his son is now using a wheelchair, that he would do all kinds of critical things, and so once you kind of work with him, then other people sort of start to it become like like you normalize the whole experience for everyone. So I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself.
Yeah. So
yeah,
you're kind of seeing it as validation is the key
efforts initially.
That's the initial. That's the precursor to starting to process any of the loss. And so through that validation, that kind of opens up the dialogue.
Yeah, then it can, then that becomes pretty rich. It could go in different directions. There are also cultural factors going on too. So maybe some families don't want to talk about it. So it's I wouldn't say I have the answer either. But yeah. Okay, so can we show the video, please? So I like to show at 1383. So as you watch this video, I'd like you to pay attention to sort of what this guy is doing wrong. As he counsels someone who... Okay, so there's 59. Yeah. So it's going to... You see that in here? What 1380? So basically, when you counsel these clients, the disability is not the one single defining characteristic of the person. Rather the disability is one of the many important parts of the person's self-identity. So, focus on not just their the physical condition, but there might be other things going on. So whether they are Asian or Caucasian or Hispanic or whatever, also the culture that they come from, the family background, the socioeconomic status, all those things that sort of make up the person. And
okay, so there's no 1380.
Oh no.
There's 13 is 13 minutes, right? Is that what that means?
No, it's the seconds.
Okay, so
1380 seconds into the clip.
Oh, because it's got minutes and seconds.
Oh, really? 1380 divided by 60. Whatever that is.
2.5.
What is it?
About 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
No.
130 seconds.
No, I don't think that's 2 minutes.
No, 1,300.
Hey, who's the math guy here? No. 6.
20 seconds?
1380 seconds.
So I think that's probably about 18 minutes, maybe?
20.
20 minutes? Yeah, more than 20 minutes. Yeah, 20.
What is it?
Yeah, 23 minutes. Ooh. Yes. Look at that.
23
Are you kidding?
I
was. I'm in awe of you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah?
Yes. Hi. How are you?
You can't pet him, he's working with
I can't pet you right now, but you are very sweet, and you're allowed here because you are a guard dog. You can see that. Oh, you have a sign too. Do not pet me. I'm looking. That's very clever. That's very clever. Well, Heidi, it's good to have you here. My office is in the back here, Heidi. Do you want me to leave the dog? Should I take the dog and move forward, or should I get you? If I just put you in. We're just going to go. The door's kind of narrow here. It's great. And the chair.
I can just take your arm if that would be easier.
Okay. Okay. That's fine. That's totally fine. That's good. And we're going to have you sit here. Now, where does the dog sit?
Oh, he'll just sit at my feet. I'll be fine. I can put him there.
Okay. So I'll just let you be in charge of that, right?
That'd be fine.
Okay. That's good.
Sit. Stand.
All right. Close the door there. So, Heidi, what brings you here today?
Well, I guess I'm just feeling really anxious and a little bit overwhelmed. I'm having some trouble with my marriage, and I think that, work is getting really tough too. I'm finding myself really just feeling like I don't have time for anything or anyone, and I think it's just the stress of, everything is just building up.
And how long have you been feeling this way?
Well, I think ever since my husband and I started having a lot more difficulties, it seems like everything has been sort of adding on top of that. That seems to be the biggest part. We haven't been talking to each other very much, and we don't even eat dinner together anymore.
Okay. And how long have you been married?
Maybe about 1.5 years.
Okay, and what was your husband's disability?
Oh, he doesn't have a disability.
Oh. How long did you say it was?
About 1.5 years.
1.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't have a disability. So, how did you and your husband meet?
Well, we met in college, actually.
Oh my goodness.
And did you have the dog then?
I'm sorry?
Did you have the dog when you met your husband?
I had a different dog then. But I had a dog, yeah.
Oh, what happened to that dog?
I'm sorry, I'm really confused.
Well, let's go back to the anxiety piece just for a moment.
That'd be great.
So, have you had therapy before?
No, this is my first time.
And last.
Well, I think what we might do in the next section is, have you ever had a Burns anxiety inventory done before?
No, I've never done that before.
Oh yeah. Well, how would we do that? Well, what I would probably do is I would read that to you, and that would work just fine, and then I could record it and explain to you what the outcome was of that inventory.
Is that normally how it's done?
Well, normally what I would do is I would give it to you and you would circle numbers and that kind of thing, but that obviously won't work for us as we are now. But that's all right. We'll work it out. We'll make it work.
Okay, well, it just seems to me that, there might be some other ways to do it, but if, yeah, we could do that if you want.
Well, you know more about this kind of thing than I do. You could give me your suggestions, on how it would best be done. Let's change gears for a bit and talk again about your marriage and these anxiety issues. I'm just curious to know what brings you anxiety within your marriage.
Well, I just think it's the fact that we...
So,
do you want me to go back to the slide?
I think it's okay. So I know what he would. So tell me what sort of was obvious for you. What came up for you?
How uncomfortable he was. He seemed really anxious and unsure.
Probably more than the client, huh?
Yeah, and his nervous laughing.
Yeah. What assumptions did you?
Well, like for example, that his spouse had a disability as well.
Yeah. Well, you would be surprised how common it is. Often people would ask my partner, "Oh, what does he do?" That's kind of like a way for them to sort of like, yeah, you would be surprised.
As soon as she can't fill out the inventory.
So what would you do? So what would be like a more empowering way to approach around that questionnaire? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. It could be anyone. Yeah. What?
About asking her before I would assume, I'd ask her how she goes about adapting.
Yeah. Yeah, like how would she do it, and how he can accommodate. Yeah. So basically.
Rather than assuming.
Yeah.
She fits to him. She comforts him.
Or he said, what I'll do is I'll read it to you, right? So what would be helpful is he could say, okay, so this is the inventory, and this is normally what happens, and people circle. How would you like to do it? So he explained what is going on. Like he should have explained, the actual inventory, so that the client can have an idea how they can go about it. Because if you don't explain, and they're not really sure sort of what is required of them. So you just explain it in a factual way. So this is a questionnaire and the different choices. Yeah. So it's more explained in a factual way. Then you ask the client, how would you like to do it? Anything else that you picked up?
Just thinking of.
He was focusing on
you guys not focusing on each other. What did you say? Sorry.
He was focusing on irrelevant things.
Yes, they totally, as they call that in the video, de-scaled. So he became distracted by, her spouse not having a disability. Oh shoot, what do I have now? And then the dog. At one time, the dog was twitching. And then he sort of became distracted. Oh, the dog is twitching. It's okay. It becomes sort of focused either on the person's blindness or on the dog or,
It was pretty demeaning right at the beginning as well. Like he was.
What do you notice?
Said something about the dog having a sign saying don't, and how smart that was, how cute that was.
Yeah.
It just was kind of like,
oh yeah,
they
like
can
he was
pick talking
up
to a little kid or something.
Well, he was talking to the dog the whole time. He didn't look up at her.
Yeah.
I noticed that. Then we were looking at the dog.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. So I could have asked her, if he interested in the dog, he could have asked her, would it be okay for me to say hi to the dog? Or it's interesting. One of the things they talk about when you first meet someone, even shaking hands, it's a very interesting concept for people who have physical challenges. Patrice, can you close your eyes?
Okay.
So, Patrice?
Yes.
Nice
Here
to
I
meet you.
am. Hi.
So, just like, so sometimes for people who cannot see, like it's difficult to shake hands with them. But if you don't shake hands, some people might think that you are you think that they are untouchable, right? So what I'm trying to say is it's very complex, and for people who have dexterity problems, they might not like to shake hands. So what if people who don't have arms, they might shake hands with their feet. So it's very complex, and there's really no right or wrong answer, but it sort of goes to tell you how complex it is. So I'd like to conclude this talk by telling you a quote. Helen Keller, she was a famous deafblind person, and she said, when one door of happiness closes, often another opens. But often we're so focused on the closed door that we forget, we fail to see the one which has opened for us. So as a counselor, don't just focus on the blindness or on the disability or on the mobility impairment. Focus on the client's inner strengths, their resources, rather than focus on the should nots and the don'ts and the cannots, and try instead to focus on the cans, the do's, the haves, instead of vice versa. So now I'm open for questions. If you like to ask, I know that we kind of running out of time, and I apologize to take us longer. Yeah. But if you have any questions.
I have just one quick last question.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you ever ask an audience if there's anybody present who has a disability, or if you'd ever do that. And
I know, that's the assumption of me too, right? Okay, I'll keep that in mind, Patrice.
No, I just.
No, you're right. Yeah. See.
I just wondered if you
so,
did that.
Is that too late to ask this question now? Well, anyone want to disclose whether they have visible condition? No. Visible. Yeah. Because there might be other things invisible. But yeah. See? So my point is, I'm certainly not an expert. I learn every day as I interact with palliative care patients, because a lot of time they have physical challenges as well. I continue to learn from them, and I'm certainly not an expert at all. But I just want to share with you what are some of the knowledge that I have, and So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope you could quickly fill out a questionnaire, sort of like help me get my feedback. That would be awesome. And so, thank you. What is this, Patrice?
I'm not sure what that is.
It's on the table. Is it yours?
Oh, it's